There is no coming to consciousness without pain. Carl Jung. Ego death is that pain. It is the shattering of the identity you once called you. The career that defined your worth, the relationships that confirmed your role, the ambitions that fueled your days, all dissolve. What remains is silence, emptiness, and a terrifying question. If the old self is gone, what now gives you reason to rise in the morning? You feel stripped of momentum. The engines that once drove you no longer turn. But pause and ask, were they ever real engines, or were they borrowed illusions? How many of your goals were truly your own, and how many were masks designed to please, perform, or survive? How much of your past striving was the ego's desperate attempt to matter rather than the soul's authentic call? In this void, you may be tempted to call yourself broken. Yet, is it not possible that this barrenness is not death, but purification? That what feels like paralysis is in fact preparation? What if your lack of motivation is the refusal of the self to let you return to lies? The piercing truth is this: after ego death, you cannot resurrect the old illusions. To try is to betray yourself. The only way forward is not to force, but to endure, waiting for the self to ignite a new fire. The question is whether you will cling to the corpse of your former ambitions, or whether you will dare to walk empty-handed into the unknown, trusting that real purpose will rise only from truth. After ego death, the landscape of your life feels barren. The ambitions that once gave you structure dissolve into dust, and you stand amid ruins that no longer obey your will. Work titles, achievements, what once seemed urgent now appears hollow. And in their absence, you confront a silence that terrifies you if the old identity has died. Where does purpose come from? What, if anything, is left to guide you? This stage is not weakness, but initiation. Jung taught that the collapse of the ego is not the end of life, but the threshold of individuation. Yet, in the moment, it feels like paralysis. You wonder, why can I no longer push myself as before? Why do my routines collapse? My desires vanish? My ambitions feel tasteless? Is this not evidence of failure? Or is it the proof that false engines have been dismantled, making space for a new source of meaning? Ego death strips you of illusions, leaving behind only what is real. But in the in-between, before the self has fully revealed its direction, you drift in emptiness. This is the desert phase, the silence before new fire. Ask yourself, how many of your old goals were truly yours? How much of your drive was fueled by persona, your mask for the world, rather than the depth of your being? And now that those masks have burned, do you not sense that the emptiness is not failure, but fidelity to truth? The context is severe ego death, dismantles every false source of motivation, fear, approval, competition, pride. You can no longer collude with them without betrayal. And so you must endure what feels like nothingness until new purpose emerges from the self. The question is whether you will cling to the ashes of dead ambitions or wait with courage in the silence until authentic life begins. At the core of Jung's psychology lies the confrontation with the structures of the psyche that once guided your life but collapse after ego death. If you are to find motivation and purpose again, you must understand why those engines failed and what now seeks to emerge in their place. Jung's map of the psyche, persona, shadow, complexes, and the self reveals both the death you now endure and the rebirth that waits beyond it. The persona is the first to collapse. For years, it provided you with motivation rooted in performance, ambition to succeed, desire to be admired, the need to be useful. Your hobbies, career, even relationships often flowed through the persona, through roles you performed to keep belonging secure. But after ego death, those masks disintegrate. You cannot find energy in them anymore because your soul refuses to be fueled by illusion. Have you noticed how exhausting it is to even attempt old routines that once came easily? How lifeless you feel when trying to resurrect old roles? This is the evidence that the persona no longer holds power over you. You are being forced to let your vitality flow from truth, not performance. Next comes the shadow, all the desires, fears, and drives you denied in order to maintain the persona. When the mask collapses, these hidden parts rise. You may feel overwhelmed by emotions you thought you had conquered: anger, grief, longing, apathy. But what if these very forces contain the seeds of your new direction? Jung warned that what you repress does not vanish, it festers and distorts. Could it be that your lost motivation is not absence, but the energy of the shadow demanding to be faced? That your paralysis is the psyche refusing to let you move forward until you honor what was once buried? The shadow is terrifying, but it is also fertile ground. Within it lie passions and gifts that may become the source of your new purpose. Then there are the complexes, those knot-like structures formed by childhood wounds and unhealed experiences. Before ego death, many of your motivations were actually compulsions born of these complexes. The drive to prove your worth, to avoid shame, to gain approval. These compulsions felt like purpose, but they were chains disguised as engines. After ego death, they lose their grip, leaving you strangely empty. Is it not possible that what you call lack of motivation is in fact freedom from compulsions that were never truly yours? Without the complex forcing you to prove or to please, the field is cleared for authentic vocation to emerge. But first, you must endure the silence. Consider also projection. Before, you may have looked at others with envy or admiration, seeing their life as the embodiment of what you lacked. These projections distorted your sense of purpose, driving you to mimic paths that were not yours. Ego death tears down this illusion too. What you once envied no longer attracts you because you sense its hollowness. The fire of projection goes out, leaving you cold. But what if this coldness is the invitation to withdraw those projections and claim the same gifts in yourself? Do you not see that the people you admired only reflected your own unclaimed potential? Projection collapses so that you may stop chasing and begin embodying. At the center of all this lies the self, the wholeness that Jung saw as the true ground of being. The self does not motivate through fear, pride, or approval. It moves slowly, silently, often only after the ego has been stripped away. After ego death, you are barren because the self is still gathering strength, still preparing the soil. But when its fire comes, it burns differently. Not frantic, not compulsive, but steady, enduring, authentic. Ask yourself, would you really trade this waiting, painful though it is, for the restless striving of your old life? Or is it not better to endure the desert until the wellspring of real purpose emerges? Taken together, these forces explain your condition. The persona no longer sustains you. The shadow demands recognition. The complexes have lost their compulsive grip. Projections dissolve, and the self waits to rise. No wonder you feel empty, lost, unmotivated. Every old engine has collapsed. Yet this is not your failure, but your initiation. Jung's warning is merciless. What you cling to after it has died will enslave you, but what you honor as dead will prepare you. So the piercing questions confront you. How much longer will you mourn ambitions that were never truly yours? How many more times will you mistake the silence of gestation for decay? How often will you try to resurrect illusions instead of enduring the waiting? And most urgently, will you dare to see that your lack of motivation is not weakness but fidelity to truth? Because Jung's insight is severe but liberating. Ego death is not the loss of life, it is the threshold of authentic life. Your task is not to force purpose from the ashes, but to wait for the self to kindle new fire. And when it comes, it will not be borrowed, compulsive, or illusory. It will be yours and it will endure. After ego death, the collapse of identity is not abstract. It shows itself in the details of your daily life. The typical examples expose the barren landscape left behind when the persona dissolves, the complexes lose their grip, and the self has not yet revealed its direction. Each sphere of life reflects the same paradox. What once seemed urgent now feels lifeless, and what once carried you now leaves you cold. Take career. Perhaps you once rose each morning with the drive to climb higher, chasing promotions, titles, or recognition. The rhythm of deadlines and achievements gave you purpose. Yet after ego death, the latter appears meaningless. You sit at your desk, stare at tasks you once mastered, and feel only emptiness. Emails blur, meetings drag, and you wonder, why should I care about this work at all? Have you not noticed how even success tastes bitter when it is detached from authenticity? And do you not see that the collapse of motivation is not laziness, but refusal, the soul's protest against sustaining illusions? The old ambition is gone because it was never truly yours. Consider relationships. Before, you may have defined yourself by roles: partner, friend, parent, child. Each role provided structure, and you played it well. But after ego death, those masks lose their vitality. You cannot pretend enthusiasm where none exists. Conversations that once felt lively now sound hollow. Social gatherings drain you because you sense the performance beneath them. And you ask yourself, do I truly love these people, or do I love only the roles we played? Who am I without the script? The silence that follows terrifies you because it reveals bonds built on persona rather than essence. And yet, is this not clarity? Is this not the stripping away of false love so that real love may someday appear? Look at spiritual practice. Perhaps you once devoted yourself to rituals, prayer, meditation, or community. These practices gave you identity as the spiritual one, a seeker or devotee. But after ego death, the rituals feel tasteless. The mantras sound empty, the gatherings feel staged. You no longer believe in them, not because spirit has vanished, but because the ego that used them for identity has collapsed. You wonder, why does my prayer feel dry? Why does my meditation echo with silence? Could it be that you were performing spirituality for the ego's survival, and now the ego no longer finds fuel in it? This barrenness is not the death of spirit, but its purification. You are being called to find God not in performance, but in the silence that terrifies you. Examine daily life. Hobbies that once delighted you, music, reading, painting, gaming, exercise, lose their spark. You pick up a book and put it down after 2 pages. You strum your guitar, then feel nothing. The television drones on, and you wonder why you even turned it on. This apathy is not mere boredom, it is revelation. For years, these activities distracted you, filled silence, or sustained persona-driven roles. Now that the mask has collapsed, you cannot find energy in them. Have you not noticed how even the smallest diversions feel false compared to the quiet gravity of your awakening? And do you not sense that stillness itself has become the only honest companion left? Even family traditions shift. Perhaps you once took pride in fulfilling expectations, visiting on holidays, carrying on rituals, preserving stories. These once gave you belonging, but after ego death, you feel estranged from them. You attend, but your heart is not present. You sense how much of it is repetition of borrowed meaning, not truth. And though this estrangement feels cruel, it is fidelity you can no longer collude with what is empty. Ask yourself, how many family bonds were sustained by role alone? And what remains when role collapses? This is the brutal clarity of ego death. Across all these examples, the same thread emerges: collapse of persona, silence of shadow, unraveling of complexes, withdrawal of projections. What once drove you no longer can. You look at your job, your relationships, your spirituality, your pleasures, and you see their emptiness. It terrifies you, because without them, what is left? And yet, is it not more terrifying to imagine returning to them, forcing life into what has already died? So the piercing questions rise. How long will you mourn pleasures that no longer nourish you? How many more times will you try to resurrect ambitions that your soul has already burned? How long will you mistake estrangement for failure when it is in fact fidelity to truth? And most urgently, will you endure this desert? Or will you betray yourself by running back to the comfort of illusions? Because Jung's insight is merciless. After ego death, the collapse of motivation across career, relationships, spirituality, and daily life is not weakness, it is initiation. You are not failing, you are being stripped. And what dies is not life, but illusion. Your emptiness is not absence, it is preparation. The self waits beneath the ruins, gathering strength, waiting to ignite a new fire. The question is not whether ego death leaves you barren. It does. The question is whether you will dare to stand amid the ruins until new life emerges, not from persona, not from complex, not from projection, but from the self. Only then will purpose return, not frantic or borrowed, but steady and enduring. And perhaps you will see that what felt like loss was always initiation. Would you like me to continue with part 5? Mechanism analysis around 800 words to show how these examples interlock into a single psychological process. After ego death, the collapse of motivation does not happen randomly. It follows a merciless but precise sequence. Each layer of the psyche dismantles an old source of energy, leaving you unable to rely on what once fueled you. To see this clearly is to stop calling your paralysis failure and begin to recognize it as the architecture of transformation. Psychological. The persona collapses. The first mechanism is psychological. Your persona, the mask you wore for approval, was the engine behind much of your drive. You worked, achieved, or performed because the mask required it. But when ego death strips the persona away, that engine stalls. Suddenly, the goals that once pushed you no longer matter. The applause you once lived for sounds hollow. Without the persona, external validation cannot move you. Do you not feel this emptiness when you try to force enthusiasm for work or roles that no longer fit? Have you not noticed how exhaustion follows every attempt to resurrect the mask? This collapse is not laziness, it is the psyche refusing to serve illusion. Emotional shadow and complexes disrupt old fuel. Next comes the emotional mechanism. The shadow, everything you denied, rises to the surface. Old complexes, wounds from childhood, lose their compulsive grip. Once these forces secretly fueled your striving, you sought achievement to silence shame, relationships to soothe abandonment, status to cover inadequacy. But when ego death dismantles those compulsions, you feel no fuel, only numbness. Without guilt or fear to drive you, the old ambitions fall flat. Ask yourself how many of your past goals were simply attempts to escape pain. And now that the pain has surfaced, can you still force yourself to run from it? The shadow demands you face it directly, not distract yourself with hollow pursuits. Behavioral collapse of routines. With psychological masks gone and emotional compulsions stripped, your behaviors unravel. Routines that once kept you disciplined dissolve. You no longer rise early for the job you do not believe in. You cannot sustain rituals that were performances of identity. The structures of your days collapse because the unconscious fuel behind them has burned out. Have you not tried to restart an old routine, only to feel like your body itself resisted? This is because the psyche refuses to move without authenticity. The death of your routines is not weakness, but fidelity. Your system will no longer collude with lies. Ethical refusal of collusion. The next mechanism is ethical. After ego death, you feel an inner disgust at anything that smells of pretense. You cannot force yourself to chase money, recognition, or approval in ways that betray your truth. Even if you try something, in you resists. The very thought of returning to the old games fills you with dread. Why? Because your conscience has sharpened. To collude with illusions would now feel like self-betrayal. And once you taste this clarity, you cannot go back. How many times have you turned down opportunities, not because you were lazy, but because they demanded your mask? How many times have you felt a deep no rising inside, even when the world expected a yes? That inner refusal is the self protecting you from regression. Existential, the desert between death and rebirth. Finally comes the existential mechanism. Ego death dismantles all old structures, but the new has not yet arrived. You live in the void, the desert, the barren space between death and rebirth. Here, no fire moves you, no old purpose satisfies. You drift terrified that nothing will ever ignite again. And yet, is this not exactly what Jung described the necessary emptiness before individuation? Have you not noticed that your soul will not allow you to fake meaning anymore? The void is severe, but it is also sacred. It is gestation, not decay. Purpose must now come from the self, not the ego. And the self takes time. The interlocking cycle, these mechanisms are not isolated, they interlock. Persona collapse removes external validation. Shadow emergence strips away illusions. Complexes losing power drain compulsive striving. Routines collapse without hidden fuel. Ethical refusal prevents regression. And existential void expands, leaving you in silence. Together, they form a closed system that no old ambition can penetrate. You cannot will yourself back into former drive because the architecture that sustained it no longer exists. The severe clarity. So the piercing questions rise. How much longer will you call paralysis failure when it is fidelity to truth? How many more times will you try to resurrect ambitions that your soul has already buried? How long will you misinterpret the desert as decay instead of recognizing it as gestation? And most urgently, will you betray yourself by forcing old engines back to life? Or will you endure the silence until new purpose arises? Because Jung's insight is merciless but liberating. What you cling to after it has died enslaves you, but what you honor as dead prepares you. The mechanism of ego death is severe but necessary. Every false source of motivation collapses so that the self can take its place. Your lack of drive is not a flaw, it is the architecture of your rebirth. Do you want me to continue with part 6? Practical application around 900 words to translate this mechanism into clear daily practices you can follow to find new purpose. Ego death strips you bare. The masks are gone, the compulsions dismantled, the borrowed ambitions dissolved. You stand in silence, terrified that nothing will ever ignite again. Yet this silence is not the end, it is the beginning. The task now is not to resurrect old engines, but to cultivate the conditions for authentic purpose to emerge. The practices are simple but severe acts of fidelity to truth taken daily while you endure the desert. Observation, naming the deaths honestly. Your first task is observation. Pay attention to where your energy collapses and where it stirs even faintly. Do you not notice how old pursuits now feel lifeless, even when you try to force them? Do you not sense how certain activities drain you, while others, small, unexpected, bring a flicker of vitality? Write them down. Track them. Do not rush to interpret. The point is fidelity, naming what is truly dead and what still breathes. To pretend otherwise is to regress. Ask yourself, am I honest about what has lost meaning, or am I still trying to disguise decay as duty? Boundaries. Refusing the masks. Observation must lead to boundaries. After ego death, you will feel pressure from others, from culture, even from yourself to return to old roles. Family may expect performance. Employers may demand your mask. Friends may want you as you were. But each time you comply, you betray the self. Boundaries mean refusing what exhausts you, even at the cost of approval. Are you willing to disappoint others rather than betray yourself? Will you endure the silence of rejection instead of the emptiness of pretense? Without boundaries, the old illusions return. With them, the self has room to rise. Shadow work, reclaiming what was repressed. The void is not empty, it is full of what you have buried. Within your shadow lie gifts you once dismissed as dangerous, impractical, or shameful. Ego death strips away the persona so that you may retrieve them. This is painful work, journaling the emotions you avoid, facing the memories you repress, confessing the truths you fear. But ask yourself how many of your real passions lie in the very places you've avoided. How many of your authentic strengths have been exiled because they threatened your mask? Shadow work is not indulgence, it is excavation. To find purpose again, you must reclaim what you once rejected. Reframe seeing emptiness as gestation. The void tempts despair. You tell yourself you are broken, barren, incapable. But what if emptiness is not failure, but gestation? Seeds germinate in darkness. So too does purpose. Reframing the silence is essential. Stop calling it paralysis. Start naming it preparation. Each day you endure without forcing false engines is a day you strengthen fidelity to truth. Do you not see that your soul refuses to move backward? That your lack of motivation toward illusions is proof of health, not sickness? Reframing transforms despair into patience, and patience is the soil where authentic fire grows. Daily fidelity, small acts of alignment. Purpose does not return all at once. It emerges through daily fidelity. Choose one small act each day that feels true, even if it seems trivial. A sentence written, a walk taken, a conversation spoken honestly. These acts accumulate, building a rhythm of authenticity. Over time, they form the structure for new purpose. Ask yourself, if I practiced one act of truth each day for a year, where would I be? Would my life not look radically different? Sustained not by masks, but by alignment. Fidelity is severe because it is slow, but it is also liberating. Every small act anchors you in the self. Relational discernment, choosing who honors the real you. After ego death, you will see your relationships differently. Some will resist your transformation, clinging to the version of you that served them. Others will honor your authenticity, even when it disrupts comfort. Discernment is essential. Who punishes you when you stop performing? Who respects you even when you stand whole? Prosperity, emotional and material, flows through relationships. If your circle demands masks, your new fire will suffocate. If your circle honors truth, your purpose will flourish. The question is whether you will dare to release those bound to your illusions and draw near to those who strengthen your reality. Endurance, surviving the desert. Perhaps the hardest application is endurance. The gap between ego death and rebirth is long. Old income streams, routines, or roles may collapse before new ones arise. You will be tempted to regress, to sell the mask again to chase quick relief. But each regression betrays the self and prolongs the void. Endurance means refusing illusions even when silence feels unbearable. Ask yourself, have I not already seen how quickly money, recognition, or approval collapses when gained through masks? Is it not better to endure discomfort than to repeat cycles of betrayal? Endurance is severe, but it is the only way to let authentic purpose gestate. The living practice. These practices, observation, boundaries, shadow work, reframing, daily fidelity, discernment, and endurance, are not glamorous. They are slow, uncomfortable, often lonely. Yet they are the only path through the void. Ego death has stripped you so that you may be rebuilt. Each small act is a brick, each boundary a foundation, each endurance a wall. Slowly, silently, a new structure rises, the life of the self. So the piercing questions confront you. How long will you keep forcing dead ambitions instead of accepting their burial? How many more years will you betray your soul to please others rather than disappoint them to save yourself? How often will you confuse emptiness with failure when it is the very soil of rebirth? And most urgently, will you endure long enough for the self to reveal new purpose? Or will you flee back to illusions until nothing real remains? Because Jung's warning is merciless. What you cling to after it has died enslaves you, but what you honor as dead prepares you. Practical application is not escape, it is endurance. Your task is to wait, to practice fidelity, to reclaim what was repressed, to refuse what is false, and to honor what is true. Then and only then will motivation return, not frantic or borrowed, but steady and authentic, born from the self. Would you like me to now close with Part 7, the conclusion and CTA, around 350 words to seal the sequence with a decisive call to act? Ego death is not collapse, it is purification. It burns away the false engines that once drove you: fear, approval, competition, pride. What feels like paralysis is fidelity. What feels like emptiness is preparation. You cannot go back to illusions without betrayal. You can only endure forward, waiting for the self to rise with new fire. Ask yourself, how much longer will you mourn ambitions that were never truly yours? How many more times will you trade quick relief for long-term betrayal? How long will you confuse silence with failure when silence is the womb of rebirth? And most urgently, will you cling to corpses of old identities, or will you dare to walk through the desert until the self ignites real purpose? Jung's warning is severe. What you cling to after it has died enslaves you. But what you honor as dead prepares you. To find motivation again, you must refuse to resurrect illusions. To discover purpose again, you must endure the barren gap until truth emerges. This is not weakness, it is initiation. So the call is clear. Observe what has died. Set boundaries against the masks. Reclaim the shadow's gifts. Reframe emptiness as gestation. Practice daily fidelity even in small acts. Choose relationships that honor truth. Endure the silence without regression. These are not glamorous steps, but they are the only ones that build a life rooted in authenticity. The fire will return, but not as before. It will not drive you with frenzy. It will move you with steadiness, clarity, endurance. Purpose after ego death is not borrowed, it is born from the self. The question is whether you will wait for that birth. Today, refuse to regress. Refuse illusions. Endure the silence. Begin the small acts of fidelity, because your life is not ending, it is beginning. The only thing that has died is what was never truly you, and the self now waits for you to live.